Here is a question worth sitting with for a second. Why can some people eat salty food their entire lives and still make it past 90, while others develop heart disease in their 50s eating roughly the same diet? Salt has a strange relationship with human history. For most of civilization, it was not a seasoning, it was survival. Before refrigeration, salt was the only reliable way to preserve meat and fish through winter, and entire trade routes, taxes, and even wars were built around access to it. The word salary comes directly from the Latin word for salt, because Roman soldiers were partly paid in it. So it makes sense that humans evolved a deep craving for it. Our bodies need sodium to survive. It helps regulate blood volume, keeps our cells working, and allows our nerves to fire properly. The problem is not that sodium is dangerous. The problem is how much of it shows up in a modern plate. A teaspoon of salt holds about 2,300 milligrams of sodium. Most major health authorities, including the World Health Organization and the American Heart Association, recommend staying somewhere between 1,500 and 2,300 milligrams a day. And yet the average adult in many countries eats close to double that, mostly without ever picking up a salt shaker, because the bulk of it is already baked into bread, sauces, canned soup, and processed meat before it reaches the table. Here is where things get interesting, though. For decades, scientists have gone back and forth on a question that sounds simple but is not. Does cutting salt actually make everyone healthier, or does it depend on who you are? Big international studies have landed on different answers. One large study following more than 100,000 people around the world found what is called a J-shaped pattern, where both very low and very high sodium intake carried more risk, with the sweet spot sitting somewhere in the middle. Another study of nearly 400,000 people in the United Kingdom found no clear link between sodium and heart disease at all, but did find a similar J-shaped pattern with overall mortality. Put differently, even some of the biggest studies in the world could not fully agree. Have you ever wondered if maybe the missing piece was not the amount of salt at all, but who was eating it? That is where potassium enters the picture, because sodium does not act alone in the body. Potassium is sodium's quiet counterweight. You find it packed into bananas, potatoes, beans, spinach, and oranges, and it works almost like a pressure release valve. It helps the kidneys flush out extra sodium, relaxes blood vessels from the inside, and takes some of the strain off the heart. Think of your blood vessels as a system of pipes under pressure. Sodium tends to tighten that system, raising the pressure inside. Potassium works in the opposite direction, helping the pipes relax and stay open. Scientists describe this constant tug of war using something called the sodium to potassium ratio, basically a measure of how much sodium you are eating relative to potassium. And that ratio, it turns out, might matter just as much as either mineral by itself. Underneath all of this sits a chain reaction most people never think about. Extra sodium raises blood pressure, and sustained high blood pressure slowly damages blood vessels, the heart, the brain, and the kidneys over years, sometimes decades, before any symptoms show up. That is part of why sodium has earned the nickname the silent factor behind heart disease. It rarely announces itself with a single dramatic moment. It works quietly, meal after meal for years. There is also a less obvious piece of the puzzle happening at the microscopic level. Too much sodium appears to stress the cells lining our blood vessels, making them stiffer and less flexible, while also nudging the immune system toward a more inflammatory state. Researchers have even found that sodium can shift the balance of certain immune cells associated with inflammation in artery walls, and can alter the makeup of bacteria living in our gut, which in turn feeds back into inflammation elsewhere in the body. So by the time scientists sat down to ask whether sodium and potassium affect absolutely everyone the same way, one obvious variable had barely been explored: whether being a man or a woman changes the equation at all. Most dietary guidelines today give the same sodium target to everyone, regardless of sex, even though men and women eat noticeably different average amounts of salt to begin with. Is that actually the right approach, or has an important difference been hiding in plain sight the entire time? To find out, a team of researchers turned to one of the largest and longest-running health studies ever conducted in the United States, the NIH-AARP Diet and Health Study, and followed disease and death patterns for over 400,000 adults for more than a decade and a half. They tracked 237,036 men and 179,068 women, all between the ages of 50 and 71, when the study began. Every participant filled out a detailed questionnaire about their diet at the very start, covering everything from bread and soup to processed meat and vegetables, which researchers used to estimate exactly how much sodium and potassium each person was eating. Then the researchers waited. For a median of 5 years they tracked who stayed healthy, who developed heart disease, and who died, and from what cause exactly. By the end of the follow-up period, 77,614 of the original participants had died. Of those deaths, 22,228 were linked to cardiovascular disease specifically, including 17,901 from heart disease and 3,748 from stroke. So here is the real question. When researchers finally broke the numbers down by sex, did the pattern actually look any different? When the researchers compared the fifth of participants eating the most sodium against the fifth eating the least, a clear pattern emerged, but it was not identical for men and women. Men eating the most sodium had a 6% higher risk of dying from any cause. Women eating the most sodium had a 10% higher risk. The gap grew even wider when researchers looked specifically at cardiovascular deaths. High sodium intake was linked to a 7% higher cardiovascular death risk in men, but a 21% higher risk in women, 3 times the increase seen in men. Researchers also identified the point where risk was lowest for each sex, what they call the nadir. For men, that point sat around 2,300 milligrams of sodium a day. For women, it was noticeably lower, closer to 1,700 milligrams. In other words, the so-called safe zone for sodium appears to be narrower for women than for men. Potassium showed the same kind of split, just running in the opposite direction. Higher potassium intake lowered mortality risk in both sexes, but the protective effect was far stronger in women. Each meaningful increase in potassium intake was linked to a 4% lower mortality risk in men, compared with an 18% lower risk in women, more than 4 times the benefit. And the sodium to potassium ratio, that tug of war between the two minerals, showed one of the clearest differences of the entire study. A high ratio was linked to a 9% higher mortality risk in men and a 23% higher risk in women. To see whether this pattern held up beyond a single group of Americans, the same research team combined their results with 42 other risk estimates pulled from cohort studies conducted around the world, together covering more than 2 million participants and over 80,000 cardiovascular events. The combined analysis confirmed the pattern. People eating the most sodium had a 13% higher risk of cardiovascular disease than people eating the least. Now, it is worth being honest about what this kind of research can and cannot prove. This is observational data. Participants were not randomly assigned to eat more or less sodium. They simply reported their own diets once, at the beginning of a very long study. That means other habits often bundled together with a high sodium diet, like smoking, carrying more body weight, or eating fewer fruits and vegetables overall, could be doing some of the work behind these numbers, even after researchers statistically adjusted for them. Still, the sheer size of this study, the consistency of the pattern across cardiovascular, heart, and stroke death specifically, and the fact that an independent meta-analysis of dozens of other cohorts around the world points in the exact same direction make this a hard pattern to wave away as coincidence. Right now, the World Health Organization recommends under 2,000 milligrams of sodium a day. The American Heart Association recommends under 2,300 for most healthy adults and under 1,500 for anyone already at higher risk. United States dietary guidelines land at under 2,300. None of them currently set a different number for men and women. This research is among the first to suggest that maybe they should, and that the extra grams of salt riding along on your plate every day might be quietly asking more of a woman's heart than a man's, even when the amount on the fork looks exactly the same. The findings come from Gan, Zhao, Inoue-Choi, Liao, Graubard, Weinstein, Albanes, and Huang, published in BMC Medicine in 2024, based on the NIH-AARP diet and health study together with an updated systematic review and meta-analysis of cohort studies on sodium intake and cardiovascular risk.